Well, there's about 100 things to talk about in this book. The book is called The Technological Republic, Hard Power, Soft Belief, and the Future of the West. And as I mentioned, Palantir in many ways was born out of 9/11 to go after terrorists and to effectively help the West wage war. But you've also been engaged in thinking a lot about almost a rhetorical war inside this country, I think, about what's happened to this country, about where we are in the West, and specifically where Silicon Valley is. And I want to start this conversation, if you'd indulge me, with a quote from the book itself, because I think it's going to allow us to get into a lot of different places. You write the following. You say, an entire generation of executives and entrepreneurs that came of age in recent decades, and really since 9/11, I think, was essentially robbed of an opportunity to form actual views about the world, leaving us with a managerial class whose principal purpose often seems to be little more than ensuring its own survival and recreation. The atrophying of the mind and the self-editing that often accompanies such decay are corrosive to real thought. The result is that corporations selling consumer goods feel the need to develop and indeed broadcast their views on issues affecting our moral or interior lives, while most software companies with the capacity and perhaps duty to shape our geopolitics remain conspicuously silent. How do you think this happened?
Well, I mean, the core thing I'm trying to say there with Nick and I are trying to say, and by the way, Nick and I we've kind of been in the trenches working together on all sorts of writing projects for the last decade, and did a tremendous job. I mean, I think the fair division of labor is 95% of the ideas are mine, but most of the writing is his, and that's why doesn't feel like it's written by a dyslexic, because it's not. So
a topic we want to talk about, by the way.
Yeah. So it's the central. I think people who were rising. So what the book really is about, one of the main topics is like, how would you build a company that's transformative? How would you build a culture that's transformative? How would you build a charismatic culture? And how do you build a country that's working? And one of the things that I think happened in my generation was people learned that the first thing you do if you want to be successful is become political and a sophist, and you trade whatever your belief structure is. There was a general sense you should have no belief structure, and with the way that played out in many contexts. A lot of times when you're debating somebody currently or in the past, you're not really debating them. You're debating the fact that they don't actually have an opinion that's theirs. And I tend to think that, I mean, I don't want to link everything to, the enormous damage kind of pagan beliefs did to our university structure. But one of the reasons that these thoughts were so effective was, on the other side of the equation, people actually had no belief. They just had a belief that they should pretend they should have a belief. And then that played out in a lot of ways. But the context here, of course, was, we were building this company in Silicon Valley, and then building the company was really hard, because the mere fact that we thought you had to have beliefs signaled to the world, well, that can't be valuable. And that was just an incredible disadvantage until it became a huge advantage, because while no one else really was building like software or really tech, though at the time people came, mostly Elon came, but it's like, built on what is the value you would create for the institution, not what is the fake value you'll pretend to create. And that led to us being differentiated on one side, but on the other side, it's just, and you just look at whatever structure you're skeptical of. Like, I think one of the things that got the university presidents into trouble, the ones that got fired, I think if they were being honest, they just didn't know what they were supposed to pretend they believed. It wasn't that, I don't actually believe that they were as anti-Semitic as they appeared. I think they were caught in this thing. They're like, I've been taught to not have a belief structure. My belief structure is I advance. That's my belief structure.
Wasn't that always a sort of, I mean, in the business context, a sort of Milton Friedman-esque view, which was that you're supposed to do whatever is best for the company, and therefore you were not supposed to have a view. And then when it became politically attractive to have a view, even come 2020, let's say, then some of these sort of views, which I think you think were somewhat fake.
The standard, so that's a complicated question because there's a question of whether society should have whether capitalism should be the arbiter of value based on a normative schema, I think is different than whether the people creating the value have a normative structure. So if you look at the institutions that are great in this society, universities, actually the structure of capitalism, how it was built, the best companies, the best artists, the best interesting people, they almost always have a very, very strong belief structure. Maybe I'm Steel Manning, Milton Friedman, but my version of that was he didn't want governments deciding which values are better than others. He wanted the market force to. But that's different than creating the value.
Right.
And I feel like I'm not as in contradiction with the classic liberals, where I think your point becomes accurate is there was a sense in which if capitalism should not be, if the normative controls on capitalism shouldn't be a government, some people thought, well, building the capital or building a thing should also not be governed by belief. Right. And I think that's actually not only not wrong, but it's not workable. So because and by the way, you know, one of the blessings of having been involved in building Palantir is I've interacted with thousands and thousands of organizations, clandestine organizations, military organizations, police organizations, thousands of commercial organizations. I have yet to see one that functions at a high level where internally there's not a very strong belief structure.